With the ever-changing world that we live in right now, renovations are becoming more and more common in the architecture industry. That's why today I wanted to show you exactly how to use renovation filters. What's going on, guys? My name is David Tomic and welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, firstly, thank you so much for joining me. On this channel, we talk all things architecture and technology. If that's something that interests you, make sure you smash that subscribe button down below, because today we're talking ArchiCAD 24 and we're talking renovation layers. There are a magnitude of different ways we can use renovation layers, and today I'm just simply going to show you how I personally use them in the real world that might be able to help you and benefit you in your own career. If you are struggling with architecture or struggling to get motivated in any way, shape or form, check out the links down below. I've got all sorts of cool stuff like a Discord chat that you can join, or even checklists for your working drawings and construction drawings to make you a much better architect or a future architect. And I genuinely just try to help you guys as much out in the links down below. So check them out and let's get started with today's video. Okay, so as ArchiCAD 24 loads up on my screen, I wanted to continue testing out this side-by-side format. In most of my other tutorials, I've been a little floating head somewhere down here on the screen. However, I like to be a little bit more interactive with you guys as much as possible. So let me know down in the comments down below if you prefer this sort of side-by-side technique or if you prefer the floating head. I know the comments in the last video were predominantly floating head, so I'm really interested to know your comments. Now, with that being said, let's get into ArchiCAD 24. Okay, so I've got ArchiCAD 24 open and I'm just gonna go for the standard Australian template. I'm not gonna throw any random templates at you guys. You can follow along with this at home however you like. Okay, so with ArchiCAD 24 open, we're gonna see this renovation filters panel down the bottom here. If you don't see this panel, just come up to window up the top, scroll down to palettes and look for renovation. If I untick that, you'll see that palette down the bottom disappears completely. So if we go back into window, palette, and scroll back up to renovation, clicking that on, we see we have no filters applied at the current moment. So basically what renovation filters do is they make your project a lot easier to manage, especially if it's existing, going to demolished, going to brand new. There's a very simple way to set it up and I'll show you the quickest way, but I'll also go into depth in all the settings in this video. So we'll start by the absolute quickest and easiest way to use demolition filters. So if we go into a wall tool, for example, I'm not going to teach layers or tools or anything. I'm just going to simply draw 3 boxes of walls. So there's 1, we're going to copy that across, there's 2, and there's 3. So we have our 3 walls right in the middle of our project. And if I highlight one of them, it's going to see it's a new status. So what I'm going to start by doing is highlighting all 3 of them and going new status. Now, because no filter has been applied whatsoever, we're not going to notice any changes. But if we start going through these renovation filters and layers, so if we click on existing, you'll see the color, for example, changes. If we go to demolition, nothing happens because we're not demolishing anything. But if I was to select this middle one and then click demolish, you'd see it changed to a dashed red line because that's how the settings are by default. If we continue to work our way through this list, we go to after demolition, you'll see that is completely gone. Then we can move continuously forward to new construction. New construction grays out all the existing buildings and does something very different to the new buildings. So if I highlight and select all of this last square that we created and go new status, you'll see that it changes its appearance. So if you were to go out and produce a set of documentation with existing drawings, you'd have a multitude of different plans. We'd start with an existing ground floor plan. We'd then go to a demolition ground floor plan. It's up to you if you include an after demolition plan to make sure it's clean and visible, or if you just jump straight into a new construction plan like you see here. It's important that people have all this information. You don't just jump straight ahead to new construction. Now, there is a couple more filters in here like planning, development, and also no filters applied, and we go back to our original state. All of these can be customized to however you see fit and however you operate your business. Now, having said that, there's a number of ways to change these settings to make it look like exactly how we need it to. So new construction is one of my personal favorites because it shows you the grayed out line of all the existing buildings and shows you new in color, so you can clearly differentiate what the difference is. But if we wanted to chop and change things around to make it work for us specifically, we'd come down into renovation filter options. So I'm actually not sure if that's popping up on my screen. Let me make my window a little bit smaller here. There we go. So you can see renovation filter options all the way at the bottom of my screen. So if I was to click on that, I'll drag my box out to full size again. If I'm to click on that renovation filter options, we'd have this palette open up in front of us. Now, as we click through these settings here on the top left-hand corner, you're gonna see the floor plan preview change exactly like we just showcased a second ago. So as we click through it, it shows you exactly what's going on. So we can change this and chop and change it as much as we like and mess with it as much as we like to show exactly what we want to show. So for instance, if we wanted to change this existing into a completely different color, we could go to graphic overwrite rules and click on graphic overwrite rules to open up our secondary palette. Inside the secondary palette, you have the 3 main characteristics up the top, and then you have a series of additional layers that can change graphic override rules. Now, that's something we can go into to creating wall types and all sorts of different good stuff, but for the time being, we won't talk too much about these down the bottom. We're just gonna focus on the top 3 layers. So we're talking about existing settings here and existing elements. So the default on here is all of these settings here, which I haven't changed from the template. Personally speaking, I do like to use the gray, but I don't like to preference all the line types to turn to solid. Sometimes you need the dashed lines to clearly indicate what things are. So in my personal experience, I usually untick line type, keep line marker on, and untick everything else in that palette. So we're just changing all the blacks, blues, greens to grays. We can go through and change the different gray color that we might prefer. There might be a part of you that wants orange as existing or blue as existing. I don't know why. The industry accepted standard is gray here in Australia, but around the world it's completely different and everybody has different preferences. So don't take my gray as hearsay and don't take the gray as it's gotta be gray. Learn what it is in your country and adopt to those standards. But in this instance, we're gonna stick to gray just for the purposes of argument. So we'll click 62 and we'll click OK. If I continue to go back to my overwrite rules and just click OK and change it to new construction, we'll see that it's just grayed out. We haven't actually completely diminished the walls and taken out all the patterns, and especially if you've got hatching in the middle of the walls to indicate some sort of insulation, it isn't dissipated completely with just blanked out gray bits. This is completely up to you guys how you manage these settings, but we'll continue to work through them just so I can give you more information on them. If we come back to existing and go back to our overwrite settings, that is my preference of setting up existing layers. Now inside the filter settings, you're also going to see this section here. It's applicable to every single category inside the renovation filters, and the principles are exactly the same. So basically in the filter settings, you can have your existing elements showing up exactly as the default settings are. You can hide all of your existing settings, or you can override them with the graphic override rules. So for instance, if we were back here and I changed this to orange and then clicked OK, you'd see as an override setting, everything went orange, but if I ticked it back to show, it'd go back to the original settings that we had before. The override graphic rules are just the simplest and easiest and also the quickest way to change everything at once, but it does mess with you if you have a magnitude of different elements and structural components that you're trying to achieve with these renovation filters. I found personally from experience that the override graphic rules work a treat if they're done correctly and if the job isn't too complex. So to provide you with a secondary example, if we move to our demolition layer and we look into this preview box over here, we'll see that everything is dashed red. Now, looking into the graphic override rules and clicking on everything to be demolished, we'll see that it changes all the line types to dashed, which is fantastic. We like that. It changes all the lines to red. Again, fantastic. We like that. White fill background, so it's clear, and it continues to change all the fill pens as well. So if you have a floor hatch, it goes red. If you have a surface, it goes red, so you can see it in 3D as well. These settings are actually really, really good, and I don't have a tendency to change them whatsoever for demolition. Red dashed lines are, in my opinion at least, a universally accepted demolition layer structure. So if you do like demolition to be clean, recognizable most places around the world, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but red dashed lines usually means knock it out. The same way we changed that orange on the existing layer, we can come in here and change it to blue, for instance, if, for example, blue is the accepted color in your country, and just click OK. And again, we'll see all of those elements change to blue. Now, if we went back into our filter settings and went show, we would see them just as if they appeared normally. There'd be nothing gone, and a demolition layer would kind of become redundant. If we went hide, again, it would become redundant because we have our after demolition layer, but then our override rules really get us where we need to be. So if I come back into my graphic override rules and change that all back to red, I can't remember which red it was, I think it was number 20, and click OK, we have our red back in action. Now, this is of course applicable to all the categories and all the renovation filters up the top here. Even if we move into new construction, we see that we overrid our existing elements and they're orange. So let's go back into graphic overrides, existing elements, change that back to a nice gray 61, what it was originally, and we'll see everything's lightly grayed out. We know exactly what it is. Our filter settings are overriding those settings. Our demolition is hidden completely. We don't need to see that. For any instance, if you needed to see it, you could change it, you could hide it, you could override it. Depending how you want to showcase your drawings, you have all these options at the click of a button. Now, obviously, we go back to hide. It's a new construction drawing, so we don't want to see anything. But the benefit, and the biggest benefit in my opinion, of renovation layers is you don't need to worry about making errors and making mistakes, or if something changes in an existing drawing, you don't have to go back and figure it out, change it, and then go back to the new construction. There was a very long time in my career that we didn't use renovation filters, and having moved to renovation filters, it is an absolute game changer. Now, with a quick little interlude, I wanted to shout out Cuts Clothing today. They are an incredible brand that I've been working with for over a year now, and they just genuinely make the best, most comfortable t-shirts in the game. I wouldn't recommend them on this channel if I thought they were garbage. You can go back through my channel for years and years and years, and almost every single black shirt that I've ever worn has been by Cuts. So take a look at them. There is a link down below. If you want to check them out, it would be greatly appreciated. Now, finally, in this renovation settings palette, you're going to see this little dialog box down the bottom, which has a series of different options. And depending on which renovation filter you're on, different things are going to be enabled and disabled. Now, we can go through these and change them again to see and suit how we like our documentation. So you can see on existing, they've hidden all the opening dimension markers. If I untick it, you'll see all the dimension markers pop up. So they're more so labels for your doors and your windows. If I tick it again, they hide. The solid cut feel is a very promising one and a very good one to use on existing. If I untick it, you'll see all those internal skins open up again. So if I retick that, we can see it's gone back to gray. Now, for example, if we come to our new construction, that isn't grayed out. And if we wanted to continue that theme, showing all those walls as gray or potentially white or whatever we had in mind, and we didn't want to show that as just a textured wall because we didn't know what was inside. We didn't know if it was brick, if it was concrete, if it was timber. We could simply just click that box and hide it all. So in an instance where you weren't entirely sure what that material was made out of, or if it was a 500, 600 deep wall that you had no way of accessing internally, you could hide all the materiality and all the internal information of a wall on a construction drawing simply by clicking one layer and not having to go in and do an abundance of 2D work. So moving down to this elements to be demolished now on our existing renovation filters layer, what you'll see is if, for example, we unticked hide all dimension markers and did the same on demolition layers requirements, all of our wall tags and window tags, so door tags and window tags would show up. Because a series of these doors have already been clicked to demolished, those tags could be hidden. Now, on an existing plan, personally, I'd like to see every single door and window tag shown because I don't yet know that information about the windows and the doors being demolished. So I would untick that personally, and I'd have that more so hidden in my demolition layer. You don't need to show this information. We just straight up know they're getting demolished. If you wanted to, you can show that on your demolition layer as well, so you know what doors are getting demolished. It's not critical information. It could be critical information depending on the job. So really just use this as a guide to help you understand renovation filters as best as possible. Continuing on down this list, we have hide doors, windows, skylights, opening symbols. If we tick that, it literally gets rid of all our doors, windows, and skylights. Now, that might be something that interests you, it might not be, but in most cases, you'd usually like to see everything that's getting demolished and everything that's existing, so it's good to have that unticked. If, for example, when you came to your demolition layer, you didn't want to see all your 2D hatching or all your zones because it was just too messy and too clunky, you could simply tick hide zones and hide all of that information. You could simply put a little keynote, all floor coverings to be demolished, adjoining surfaces to be made good. You could do whatever you needed to clean that up and make it a less clunky, less messy drawing. Overall, that looks very clean to me, but at the same time, I like to know I'm demolishing tiles, so that one stays off in my personal opinion. Moving further down the track, you can see that we have hide objects, very self-explanatory, takes away all of the object. We have solid cut fill, which then is basically the same premise as what we had originally up the top for solid cut fill for existing elements. It just makes everything extremely visible, but also wastes a lot of ink. So up to you, it's a personal preference. Transparent film can again be unticked and ticked, very similar to how zone works, depending if you're working on a 2D element or a zone material. The do not intersect tab is again not that really critical. It just intersects walls or doesn't intersect walls. It shows you how much to cut or don't not cut. It's a personal preference, but it can be ticked on and off like you would usually do. Now the remaining two here are just very simple personal choices in how you document. If you want to mark openings with an X, it just gets really messy, it gets really clunky, it gets a little bit too much in my opinion, so you want to still keep it as clean as possible. And finally, your annotated elements down the bottom, do not override dimensions and text, which is a great one if you don't want to get rid of all your text, if you don't want your text to go red, if you don't want your labels to go red, you just keep it ticked. And if you do not override drafting fills and lines, again, is a separate option for you as well. Like I mentioned previously, all of these options can be adjusted individually depending on the renovation filter. So depending on the renovation filter you're on, depending on what information you want to show, the existing floor plan, for example, we could hide all of our markers, we could hide all of our demolition markers, we could hide all of our doors, we could hide all of our zones and make it a very, very, very clean, crisp plan. But then how is it existing? We don't see all the existing doors, we don't see the tiles, we have no idea what's going on. So something along these lines would be a lot better used and a lot better utilized for people on site to understand what's going on. For demolition, it works very much the same. I personally like the default settings they have down here. Most of the time, the only thing I'd untick is the annotation elements. Sometimes I like the text to go red so we know we're demolishing text as well. But overall, it is a very good setup. There isn't too many things you need to change. The after demolition plan, I personally don't use that much. It is a clean plan that shows you what's been demolished, and it's probably better for during working out stages and actually using an ArchiCAD than producing an after demolition plan to submit for a building permit. It might be a mandatory requirement in your state, in your country, wherever you might be. However, I don't see too much value in it personally, but it is there and it's definitely useful for some people that might need that information. Finally, new construction is of course the most important. It's the things that we can clearly differentiate between the old and the new, and we know exactly where those old things are gone simply by flicking through those pages. I personally don't show any of the information from the demolition plan. So for example, if we were to override and show everything demolished on one plan, it would be very messy, it would be very clunky and hard to read. So we simply hide everything demolished, in my opinion at least. Now, in this instance, the new construction, if we come back into our graphic override elements, we go new elements, we can see that the foreground pen is green. We don't want that, and we also probably don't want our surfaces to be overwritten. If you're doing a new construction model, you're probably showcasing some materiality in 3D, you're probably showcasing what that building really needs to look like, so you don't want those surfaces to be completely overwritten. By unticking that box, you have that freedom and that liberty to actually change materials as you see fit. If you're doing a 3D massing model, for example, and you just want simple shapes and colors, that is a very quick and easy way to adjust all of your new construction surfaces without having to go change everything individually, then changing it all back. Personally, I'd go into existing elements as well and untick that like I said before, so we don't have two different color material palettes working against us in a new construction. So clicking OK there and going into new elements and overriding that, we'll see all of our elements have changed. Now, one thing I missed in these graphic override rules is the simple fact that the fill background is transparent. We want our fill background to be white so that we can actually see it stand out. If I click OK again, you'll see all my objects go back to white and they're very clear and very visible. If we were to go back to show original, you'll see they're really grayed out. They're hard to see. It's hard to differentiate between the existing and the new. So it's critical that you change that and override that so you can clearly differentiate between the two. Now, I know personally in different practices I've been with, they don't use black as their key new material. They actually come across to a blue because it stands out a lot better. So if we change ours to blue, click OK, we very, very clearly know what's blue, we very clearly know what's new, and we know what's existing. These two colors we don't find too much value in the current office I work for the simple fact that our builders always print in black and white. So it is more about line types and line quality, especially printer quality. We tend to offer people the ability to print from our services because we know the printing will be much better and we're not going to have to worry about them going, oh, the printer was a bit shoddy and the grays are really gray, the blacks are really gray, I have no idea what's going on. However, if you do specifically specify print and color, they will know very clearly what's new, what's old, and it's a fantastic option to go with a blue as opposed to a black. Now, I know we show sketch design differently to how we show our design development and how we show our working drawings. So if, for example, you wanted to duplicate your existing, let's just go duplicate, and rename this completely 07 sketch design. Now we've created an exact duplicate of all the settings of existing. But what I want to do is go into graphic overrides, go to existing and change all of this to black. So I could change that to black, go override, go back into these graphic override rules, change the fill type, change the foreground pen, change the background pen, change the line type, go OK, and all our walls are black. So it really is that simple to change and adjust elements as you need, as you see fit, to really make it work for your business, your company, and whatever project you're working on. Now, I can simply click OK. We've done a whole bunch of changes. We've messed with it completely. It's very different to how we started. If you didn't follow along and change all those settings exactly how I did it, that's okay. This is YouTube. You can go back and watch it a million times. But in reality, all I really wanted to show you is how much of a difference it makes to the actual drawings and design. So we've got existing, we've got our demolition, we've got our after construction, we've got our new construction, and we've got our sketch design. Now, if we were to do that same experiment there in 3D, if we open up our 3 boxes, we see 3 simple gray boxes with no filters applied. Existing, one of our boxes disappears, fantastic. We don't want to see that new construction, so I'll spin back around. So it's in the same order it was in 2D. Go into demolition, that box goes entirely red and we know what we're knocking out. After demolition, that box is gone. We have no idea it exists anymore, exactly like it would be on site. New construction, a beautiful box appears out of nowhere. Now, if we went back into our renovation layers, went graphic override rules, went to new construction and made sure that our new looked purple. We wanted to look purple for some reason, clicking OK and OK, our box is purple. Everything we select is simply changed like that. So if I was to just change this one individual wall to new, it would go purple individually. So if I went back to existing, that wall would be completely missing and we'd have no idea it ever existed until we changed our settings to new construction layers. The same principle applies for demolition. Let's knock that out. It's gone. You can't see it in new construction. If we move back to existing, it's there again. And then same principle, move to demolition, it's red. We know we're knocking it out, we know what we're doing. And finally, I'm just gonna go back to no filters applied to simply showcase the ease and ability of renovation filters. By clicking through some tabs, basically, we're changing our entire model in a matter of seconds. If you're not using renovation filters, man, you have been missing out for so long. because this makes life so easy. I truly hope this was a great help to anybody that watched. If you have any more questions, let me know. Anyway, that's all from me today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you learned something today about renovation filters and ArchiCAD 24. If there's anything left unanswered, leave a comment down below. I check these comments quite regularly. And if you really want to get in touch with me and learn more, there's a Discord link down below as well that you can join the Discord chat. Together in an ever-growing community of architects, architecture students, and everybody else in the discipline, we're slowly building our own little Discord world where we can all share knowledge and get better. If that's something that interests you, there is a link down below. If it's not, as always, I will see you next Monday.